Welcome, everyone, to Crew Call as we get set for game number 3 of the NBA Finals. The scene, Oracle Arena. The Raptors arrived on Monday, June 3rd, into San Francisco. They had a media day on June 4th in Oakland at Oracle, and tip-off, of course, was Wednesday night against the Golden State Warriors, with the series tied 1 game apiece. Late news that day, Sherm, that Klay Thompson was a scratch.
Yeah, it was one of those things that, if you're a Raptor fan, you felt good about, because when you thought about Golden State without Kevin Durant, the idea was, well, now you just got 2 guys to really worry about. Well, without Klay Thompson there, you were really focused on Steph now. And I think, the interesting thing about that scenario was we saw in that game specifically, the Raptors do a great job defensively. We saw Nick Nurse throw out the little box and 1 action. We saw some interesting things happen, but I just think that the focus for the Raptors didn't change. They didn't care who was on the floor. They were going to lock in and get the job done. They weren't going to buy into that, well, this is a weakened team without Klay Thompson. They went out there and they did a great job defensively, even though Steph Curry scored 47 in that game.
Jonesy, how much do you think a factor when you go back to the regular season that the Raptors had won on their court? Do you think that carried over at all, or were there too many months and too many games in between that, so that when they arrived there at Oracle, like, all right, look, it's, we've been here before type of thing?
I agree with the latter part of your statement, Matt. It was a big deal during the regular season because they were still trying to establish something. I mean, it was early. That game was in December. But you're at this point in the finals. The Raptors had, Jack made this point in the last show, had won on the road. They knew what to do. And I thought the pervasive attitude of Kawhi Leonard, again, we talked about it in the last show. No, we're not going to get 1. We're going to get 2. But before you can get 2, you need to get 1. And the Raptors came out and were aggressive that entire game. And I mean, you look at the scoring. Guys bounced back. Gasol had a good game. Pascal shot 50%. He scored the ball well. And Kawhi, of course, was fantastic. Danny Green had a good game. So all of a sudden, it was almost like a wake-up call, losing game 3, Jacko, or game 2, Jacko, and they come back and bounce back quickly early in game 3.
Well, what they have, 6 guys in double figures that game. Yeah. And the thing that jumped out at me, the ball movement was sensational. And, Matt, you talk about this a lot in terms of the 3 being a major weapon. And give Golden State credit. In game 2, I spoke about it on our last show, they did a great job defensively guarding the 3-point line against the Raptors. Kawhi had a big game, but they shut everything else down. They held the Raptors below 30% from behind the arc. In this game, what did the Raptors shoot? 14 to 25 from behind the arc. The movement was great. Danny Green, Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, just on and on and on. Everyone got into the act, spread the floor out, and they dealt with what Steph Curry brought to the table in terms of how great he was in that game. But nonetheless, I thought offensively they were just at an elite level.
Leo, all 5 starters, 17-plus points. It was a determined Raptor team, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think someone made a note that it was written on a blackboard, said, let it rip. And somebody saw that before the game. And that's what they did, right? They came out.
Phil Handy wrote that down. I remember talking about Phil Handy wrote it down. I think Danny Green and him have been talking. They just said, let it rip,
That's right. Don't overthink it. Just do what you do. Go out and play with a lot of confidence. And I saw a lot of game 1 in game 3. Raptors shot better than 50%. They knocked down 17 threes in this game. And like you said, everybody was involved in the action. And remember, when you're playing Golden State, we talk about this all the time, the better your offense is, the more it's going to help you. And, everybody talks about Klay Thompson not being available. Yeah, that kills you on offense. I mean, it puts it all on Steph. At the same time, it hurts Golden State big time defensively. You got to remember, he's one of the best 2-way players in the NBA. So not having him and Kevon Looney. I mean, Kevon Looney's a big physical body. The Raptors, I thought, did a great job of taking advantage of whatever Golden State didn't have. And hey, it's the playoffs, man. You can't worry about it. You can't feel sorry for anybody. You got to go get it, Sherm.
You're absolutely right. And you know this in terms of the ball movement, as Jack alluded to. He had 30 assists in this game and only 10 turnovers.
And I think what to me stood out as well is the fact that the Raptors kind of jumped on it early as well. And if it weren't for, the way that Golden State in those first two games, albeit splitting in Toronto in that third quarter, we could be looking at a much different story for the Raptors in terms of going into this game 3, maybe being up 2-0, because it was a Toronto team that I think had been dominant in the first two games in quarters 1, 2, and 4. And the third quarter was kind of saving the backside of Golden State to this point. So I think when you factor in everything you guys have talked about, the ball movement, the scoring, the balanced attack, as Leo said, letting it rip from distance, combine all that, and then fast forward to the third quarter where the Raptors controlled that third quarter in that third game, and ultimately were able to just ride it out to a fairly, dare I say, easy win in the fourth quarter. And in spite of the major efforts from Steph Curry with the 47 points, I went back and actually watched a little bit of the game this morning just in that fourth quarter. He scored his 45th points with 8 minutes left in the game. He had 2 points the rest of the way. And that was massive, obviously, to shut down any potential comeback that the Warriors might be thinking about trying to make against Toronto.
It's interesting because there has been a theme now for quite some time with the Raptors. And, Jack, you touched upon this over the last few crew calls about how good they've been on the road. And it's something that they're not fearful of the crowds. And as we know in Oracle, you looked up how much red did we see, how many fans showed up. You'd walk in San Francisco, right? Union Square, how many Raptor fans would you stop and take pictures with and talk to them? I mean, it's just a spectacular time of the year, but their mindset, they have that kind of road mentality, right? Hey, we are off to ourselves. We're coming in here. This is a business trip. And you go in and you perform. Now, on the road, and they had a little bit of this at game 2, that you're going to run into offensive droughts. I mean, everybody knows, Sherm, that you're going to be in a spot where you're not going to be able to get it offensively. But can you do it game in and game out for 48 minutes defensively? And I think the Raptors game 3 kind of put their foot down. I know, as E mentioned, you guys all meant 47 points from Steph, but they put their foot down. And Serge Ibaka was a big piece to that. Sherm, he had 6 block shots.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. And, we've seen Serge throughout the course of this playoffs just get better and better. And in a game where you knew that Steph Curry was going to carry the offensive load, I thought the focus of the Raptors were, okay, we know Steph's going to take a lot of shots. We know he's going to score the basketball. But what can we do to these other guys to ensure that he gets zero help? And I thought their focus and attention to detail from that perspective was phenomenal. I think there was only 3 players in double figures in that game, if I'm not mistaken. And you think about the Raptors collectively, how they got it done. Danny Green's defense, Fred VanVleet's defense, obviously Kawhi. We talk about Serge's defense. And the focus, even though the Raptors were able to win this game and they shot the ball extremely well, it was their defense that got the job done. And I really think throughout the playoffs, and I go back to game 2 of the first round against Orlando, the Raptors lose game 1, and everybody's shaking their head again. I thought game 2's defense was the best defense I'd seen the Raptors play all season to that point. And to me, they established that they weren't just a regular season team in terms of their defensive ability. They were able to lock down in playoffs as well. And I thought we saw that in game 3. Their defense was phenomenal, Leo.
Hey, I think there's a point to be made. Steph, 47 points, right? Big time effort. It wasn't like the Raptors just said, okay, we're going to give him any shot he wants and shut everybody else down. They made Steph work for his 47 points. That's what a great player he is. He made tough shots. He had guys in his grill the whole time. And guess what that did? That took its toll. Steph Curry, to me, wasn't quite the same after that game because it was him. And this is late season, man, and who knows what injuries everybody has at this point in time. And he had to battle and fight and grind to get that 47, a spectacular performance, but I think the fact that he had to try to do it all on his own helped the Raptors going forward.
Leo, I'll jump in there for 1 second. Sorry, Maddie. I remember specifically in the fourth quarter, it was right around, I want to say, the 5-6 minute mark, and Kyle Lowry drained his 5th three-pointer of the game. And it's human nature, I suppose, but I specifically remember seeing Steph Curry and just kind of the shoulders slumped, the head went down. Like,
I remember that. That's
great. And I think it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Just that as much as he was doing, he was beaten down himself, knowing I'm doing everything I can. I've got my team on my back right now, and it's still not enough because Toronto just keeps coming in waves.
And then, a player that had really been a major factor in the success of Golden State, Draymond Green, Jonesy, it wasn't like he stepped up to that next level where you go, okay, no Clay, no KD. Hey, Draymond, it's your Raptors did an exceptional job of containing that as well. And from a defensive standpoint, you look at the numbers of this game, holding a team, and it doesn't matter whether they did or did not have different players because they have players on that team, as we all know. And when you hold them in their building to 39% shooting, you're doing your job, Jones.
You are, Matt. And, there's a couple themes here for me for the entire playoffs with the Raptors. And we've all talked about their resiliency. After a loss, game 1 in Orlando, against Orlando, they lose, they come back strong. They lose game 3 in Philly, they come back strong. They lose in Milwaukee, they lose 2 straight, they come back strong. They lost a game at home in game 2 that they figured they should have won. And again, they were the aggressor. And Matt, you talk about a guy like Draymond Green. He's one of those guys, you've got to go at him. You can't let him be comfortable. As hard as he comes at you, you've got to go back at him the same way. And I thought, again, to me, the theme of that game was the Raptors being the aggressor. And I compare it to, we all watched the fight game. An aging fighter. Golden State had been to the finals 5 years in a row. An aging fighter that everybody respects and is still a good fighter, but there's an up-and-coming young guy who's not really afraid of him, knows that he's vulnerable, and there's a chance that you can get in there and land a few blows and put the seed of doubt in there. And I thought that's exactly what the Raptors did when they won game 1. They knew they could have won game 2, and they come out aggressive and win game 3. And now, Eric and Leo, to your point about Steph's shoulders drooping, Golden State knows, man, we're in a fight with these guys. And you know what? The seed of doubt has been planted, and these guys can beat us if we're not careful. And I think the Raptors fed off that confidence too, Matt.
Yeah, Jacko, you need players that have done it before to step up. And that Danny Green has done it before. He's won a title. You know who he is, a pro's pro. And he had struggled. And he knew. But as they say, shooters shoot, right? Make until you miss until you make, or, whatever. Sherm knows that. Leo knows those sayings. Jonesy,
Come on, man, get it right.
Yeah.
Make it miss till you make.
Miss till you make.
Come on, you only sit next to me for how many years? Come on.
Hey, make until you miss is also a factor too, and miss until you make. I got it. But Jack, they needed Danny Green. You're on the road, and he has the game that they needed in that pivotal game 3.
He was due, quite frankly. And I think the other thing, too, is internal competition is a great thing. Fred VanVleet was coming on, and some of his minutes were being compromised now. And I think there came a point for Danny Green for him to bust out and have a game that he knew he was capable of having. And we all knew he was capable of having because he had an outstanding year for the Raptors last year. Quite frankly, a bounce-back year for him. There were a lot of people saying there was questions about how much he actually had left in his game. And, you look at it in terms of career year, he had the best year of his career playing for Nick Nurse. I think people forget that. Kawhi Leonard had quite a year playing for Nick Nurse. And people don't give Nick Nurse enough credit for that. But they really needed that element of what Klay Thompson brings to Warriors on their end. And that is that guy that you have to really extend your defense to cover. And it really makes other people around them better. And Danny Green just performed at a high level. And Matt, just one other point. You made a point earlier about, and I've talked a lot about this in terms of winning on the road. If I had to pick one single guy who's the most responsible for all this, that's Kyle Lowry, in my opinion. I think the guy, as a former coach, if there's one guy I would want on my team going into a hostile building, I want that guy on my team. I think, as I recall and think back of his years with the Raptors, the games I remember most about him are his road performances. There are certain guys that have the mental toughness and the grit to win on the road. And to me, Sherm, I think he has all those things, and it showed that night. And I'll tell you what, it definitely showed Game 6 in the deciding game when he got them out of the gate big time.
Well, I was going to say that Game 6 really showed what Kyle was made of in terms of being able to take control earlier that game. But even in Game 3, I mean, it's one of those things. We talk about Kawhi's greatness, and he was absolutely off the charts all playoffs long. We talk about Danny Green finally having that game that they need him to have at the right time, too, for them to have success. Marc Gasol played well in that game. Serge came off the bench and did a great job. But we tend to kind of overlook or just not discuss enough the job that Kyle does, whether he's scoring or not. And sometimes the focus is on Kyle not scoring. If you look at his impact on the game, you got to watch the game to see it. He makes significant plays throughout the entire game. This game was no different, but he scored the basketball as well. And I think sometimes when you're trying to evaluate the whole game, you're trying to evaluate the ways that the Raptors have success, sometimes Kyle gets lost in the shuffle because of the consistency he provides with the toughness and the ability to make a play, the ability to draw charges, the timing of his shots that he makes. He was phenomenal in Game 3 as well. And to your point, Jack, he just continued to get better as the finals wore on.
Can I just make one quick point? Can I make one quick point? Think about the last game the Raptors just played at Utah. I mean, who was great that night? I mean, the guy just brings it in hostile environments. He just feeds off of that stuff.
Both of your points about Kyle are so right, and it reminds me of a conversation that I had with Leo's former teammate, Kevin McHale. And he said, I tell young players all the time, when what you do isn't working, where do you go? He said, because I remember Larry Bird not scoring a point and still getting a double-double. His shot was off. He had 10-plus rebounds, 11-plus assists, or whatever that number was at that time. What else do you do? And the greatest thing that Kyle Lowry does, I mean, you have the compete level, but he can change a game, Leo, defensively like that. We have seen it throughout the 7+ years. Shots aren't going. Everybody's laboring. He maybe even his shot isn't going. And all of a sudden, he knows it's time. And the great ones always know when it's time, right? That's why he's North Philly's finest, right? He knows it's time. Here comes a guy, 250 pounds, boom, slides over, takes the charge, and the game changes. Leo, we've seen it time and time again.
My question when you talk about Kyle Lowry is, what doesn't he do? I mean, think about it. I mean, he influences the game in so many ways that, you know, he can score 0 points and be the reason you win the game. And here's something I think that not a lot of people talked about. People said, okay, DeMar's gone. Kyle's ticked off. Kyle's not stupid. Kyle knows who Kawhi Leonard is, okay? He also knows who Danny Green is. He also knows what Marc Gasol brings in. And what Masai did to me, he stimulated Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry is one of those guys, he's thinking the game, right? He knows everything your team's trying to do. He knows everything the other team is trying to do. If you have guys around him that can react to him and he can react to them because they think the game the way he does, do you think that doesn't fuel Kyle Lowry? I thought Masai, Bobby Webster, Dan Tolzman did a great job of stimulating Kyle Lowry. That's why Kyle Lowry had the season he had. And Jack, to your point, It's not one guy. I mean, every guy that plays for Nick Nurse has a career season. And that tells you something, that he's putting all these guys in a position to succeed, and Masai gives them the tools to do that.
Yeah, E and Jonesy, and you look at it, I think in that storyline there, Marc Gasol bringing him in, certainly was the final move that, okay, hey, this is legit. This team's making the run. It's interesting to note, you go back to Jonesy, you mentioned this earlier in the show, to that early December. What happens? Draymond Green hacks Jonas Valanciunas. Valanciunas gets hurt, and that does change.
Raptors in first place.
Yeah, that changes a lot, and who knows what would have happened if JV doesn't get injured and they decide to do – maybe they still decide to do the move. But, Eric, when you look at this team and you think about the history, the greatest Raptor of all time is number 7, and once again, on the road, he does his thing.
I just said it yesterday, and Jonesy and I were doing a radio show on satellite radio across the country. And Jonesy, I think we talked about it, and I know I've said it a few times. I think you guys might agree with me. Not to twist your question or conversation a bit here, Matty, but people always talk about, whether the Raptors might hang number 15 from the Raptors one day, and if Vince Carter's ever going to be immortalized by the Raptors. And I feel right now, with what he has done for this organization over his time in Toronto now, for everything he's done for playoff success and now championship success, and for the fact that he's climbed the record books and everything that he's done to represent this city, this province, this country, etc., Kyle Lowry deserves the honor of being the first. So Vince is going to have to wait. I don't know who else, whether it's DeRozan, whether it's Chris Bosh, I have no idea. But the first jersey that should hang in the rafters at Scotiabank Arena is number 7. He's the greatest Raptor of all time. He's number 1 all time, and he deserves that honor.
That's a no-brainer. Quite frankly.
Interesting. When I think about it, and I always break it down to its simplest terms, if you took all the money away and you were out in the schoolyard playing up to 7. I was just thinking this,
Jonesy. We say this all the time. When you
all the time. When you go to the gym and the game's up to 7 and you want to hold a court, you look around the gym and you go, I ain't picking that guy. I'm not picking that guy. Kyle would be the first guy you picked, regardless of size or anything else. Kyle would be because if you took all the money away and you were playing the game up to 7 for pride, and that comes through, everybody talks about the game-winning plays that he makes. It's because of the way he's wired. The pride, the way he plays the game, his competitive spirit, the will to win. And then, Leo, to your point about being stimulated, not that he hasn't done that before, and he never did that before. He always does that. And now he's got guys with him. Marc Gasol, as you said, thinks the game the same way. Kawhi Leonard, spectacular talent, thinks the game, plays that way, has that competitive spirit. Danny Green understands his role in all of that. And all the other stuff falls into place. But, Kyle's leading that charge. And there were times when the stuff that he did on the road, people look at it like antics, like, oh, come on, look at that. No. The guy's trying to win. And now that he has people with him, those aren't antics. Those are game-winning plays. Those are things that he's trying to do to win, and everybody else is on board. So that's, for me, that's the simplest term, Sherm. If you're playing in the schoolyard, Kyle's the first guy I'm picking.
Oh, no doubt. That's a game point winner right there every time it's up on the schoolyard. But just want to say this too, guys. A guy like Kawhi, an elite player like Kawhi, they only respect guys who can get it done and guys who bring it every single night. And you could see that Kawhi had a lot of respect for Kyle Lowry, but the way that he played. So when you can get a guy like that who's coming into a situation and you know he's on another level, to look at you and say, yeah, I can roll with that guy, that says a lot about who Kyle is as a player.
When we talk about hanging jerseys, okay, we should have different categories, okay? Kyle is a hang the jersey, man. That's like you said, everybody agrees, that's a no-brainer. Let's go for some statues and for some other things to some other guys, all right? Hey, Kawhi, I want a statue of that Game 7 jumper. I want a statue of that thing firing off in the corner. But when you talk about hanging somebody's jersey, that's a guy that's dedicated to the franchise. That's a guy that builds the franchise. That's a guy that takes you somewhere that you didn't think you can go. Kyle Lowry is the one guy right now, in my mind, is 100% hang it up.
All right. Well, we come to that point again to thank everyone. We appreciate everybody out on the front lines. Everybody at home, keep doing what you do. I am reminded and thankful when you go back and think about Game 3 that Leo Routens is still here with us, because that was the game that the massive bowl, that was, how big was that, Leo? Like,
is that big.
Missed you by that much.
The crazy thing is, this thing was so hard that when it came from the ceiling and hit the floor, I felt the thud. It didn't break. So that would have been. Now, I have had some thoughts subsequent to the event, thinking that, a slight indentation right here, $100 million lawsuit.
Yeah.
As long as I got a good plastic surgeon, it wouldn't have been the worst thing.
Meanwhile,
you would have been a rich woman.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Leo and I, the rest of the game, are calling the game like this.
Hey, the funniest thing is Matt's pulling me to him like he's going to save my life. And I'm going, dude, it's up above us. It's going to come down on you now.
Oh.
We're so happy
calling
that
the
both
game
of you
looking
guys
up
are
for.
okay.
Huh?
I'm thankful
We're so
you
happy
made
that
it
both
through,
of you
buddy.
guys are okay.
Yeah, I can tell. I could feel that, sure.
Well, everybody, please know we're thinking of everyone at home. Continue to practice social distancing. We'll be here for game number 4. Raptors take a 2-1 lead in the NBA Finals, and man, do you start to feel it, don't you? You start to feel it. There it is. 2 wins away from winning it all. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you once again on Crew Call. See you guys.